I've got 2 slides. Thank you very much for the invitation to come along today. I'm sure my slides will catch up for me in a moment. I need to click. That would help, wouldn't it? I'm clicking. I can use this. It's like that's easier. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Oh no, it's fine. I'll do it. It's fine. There's only 2. So yes, thank you for the invitation to come along today. And I had a call with one of your team a few weeks ago. I said, so what do you want me to cover today? And he went, I don't know. What do you feel like covering? It's like, I mean, I could go in a number of different directions. And then I probed a bit more, and one of the bits of advice was collaboration. So I thought, okay, that's quite big. And so then I had a look at the agenda, and I actually thought what I would try and do today in 15 minutes, 14 now, after messing about with the slide deck, is just to shine a light on why this moment is so critical, this moment in time, and why we do really need to get serious about systems change. I want to share with you a model for thinking about systems change. And then I want to share with you the how about systems change, just to kind of shine a light on the different strategies that we can use for systemic change, and to enable you to hopefully see your role in system change for a new climate, and see how your role then complements other roles in the ecosystem around us, and finish up with just some thoughts for you personally. That's the plan. Are you in the right place? Great. So just before I show you chart 1 of 2, they're really boring, but I'm hopefully going to bring them to life. Just wanted to reflect on this moment in time, and you're all here because you care deeply about our climate crisis. And like me, you are aware that time isn't on our side, but you'll also be aware that things are moving. And certainly from my perspective, I do see at least 2 pathways from this moment in time. And I talk a lot about the crossroads, which for those of you as old as me, is not the soap opera that was around a long time ago. But definitely there are 2 very clear potential pathways ahead of us. There's one where, yes, we might decarbonize, perhaps not as fast or as deeply as we need to, but a decarbonisation which is driven by a little bit of carbon tunnel vision, and perhaps, in my words, a shallow transition. So yes, we might get to some semblance of a net zero economy, and there's no guarantee about that, but it might be a net zero economy where we have left millions of people behind, and therefore we haven't really delivered the deep systemic change that is required, which then leads us to the second pathway, which is one of deep transformation, one where we do take this opportunity to really get to the root causes of our climate crisis, and also begin to solve for our biodiversity crisis, for our inequality crisis. These are all linked, they're not separate. And so the second pathway at this crossroads is a pathway of deep transformation, systems change. And we hear a lot of talk about systems change out there. And I just thought I'd use today and the fact that you're here, a captive audience, and just share with you what I think we mean by systems change. And then you're next in a party and someone says, so what do you mean by system change? Well, glad you ask. And you can even share the slides I'm about to show you. So I told you it was an exciting chart, didn't I? Does anybody here know about the multi-level perspective? Has anyone come across it? Yay. So I can make sure I don't make this up now. There's someone in the audience that actually knows what this is. So this is the framework that we use at Forum to help describe what we mean by a system and help describe what we mean by systems change. And it's an academic framework, the multi-level perspective. It's been around for a long time. And it, first of all, helps us understand, well, what do we mean by a system? And a system can be this room. This room is a system. It could be a social structure such as education. A system could be a socioeconomic system like food, like energy. It could be the global economic system. It could be an ecosystem like the ocean. The world is full and we are surrounded by interconnected systems. And any system tends to operate at three levels. You have this landscape level where big picture trends will play through, trends such as demographic change, climate change. You've then got that blue ribbon in the middle, which is the regime. This is kind of where we all go about our daily lives. It's where trends such as shifts in legislation make themselves felt. And I'm really glad we're in something called the reactor, because the bottom of any system is the niche. And it's often where you see innovation bubbling up. Sometimes it bubbles back down again, but sometimes it makes its way into the regime. And there are three generally non-linear phases to systems change, although this chart implies that they're super linear and super predictable, but they're not. But just because it's a useful way of thinking about system change, there's usually three phases. So the startup phase is where these landscape pressures begin to make themselves felt on the regime. And if we take the shift in our climate system right now, that's kind of where we've been for the last few decades, well, 2 decades. So the science is becoming more and more available. We're beginning to feel the impacts of climate change. It's beginning to make itself felt in the mainstream news and media, for example. And equally, at the same time, you have innovation coming up from the niche. So massive investment in renewable technology. 5 years ago, when people said, well, renewable will have price parity with oil and gas, people went, no, it has. To that. So that's the startup phase of any systems change. And then we head into this accelerated phase of system change. And when it comes to climate, so thinking about the system change around climate, where we take the energy system, we're transitioning from an energy system with goals to create heat, mobility, and so forth, predicated on oil and gas and heavy carbon intensive fuels, to where we want to get to, which is a zero carbon energy system. We're in that accelerated phase of system change. So there's no escaping the fact we need to transition the energy system. That innovation has bubbled up from the niche, but the critical ingredient of any systems change is you all, is individuals willing to embrace that change. And we sometimes forget that, and we can often wonder, well, the science is really clear, the technology is here, and we sort of say, well, why isn't the system shifting? And it's really very simple. People aren't prepared to do things differently. So systems begin to change where that landscape pressure is felt in the regime, innovations are bubbling up from the niche, and there are actors willing to do things differently. And that's exactly where we are in the energy transition right now. Governments, philanthropy, businesses, civil society, all willing to do something different. And that's also why this moment in time feels so chaotic and so dynamic, because accelerated system change is super, super messy. And it's also where you have both activating forces, which is us as individuals, but very strong resisting forces. And we're really feeling that at the moment. And we have to engage with those resisting forces because they're very real. There's a brilliant quote I use a lot, which is the closer you get to a system changing, the harder it pushes back. That's what's happening right now. So hold your nerve, really, is all I'm saying, because I think when we come to the energy system, we're going to get to that stabilization soon. And that's where we need new rules of the game. We need new legislation to stabilize that new system. So that's what we mean by systems change. And I've just used the example of the energy transition. Did that make sense? And again, it is why it feels so messy and so difficult right now. And so what does this then mean for you all and your work? Through our work at Forum, we work on a number of programs designed to transform the energy system, the food system, the wider business ecosystem. We reckon there are at least 8 strategies, 8 levers you can pull for systems change. And I wanted to share these with you today so you can see kind of where your work fits and understand that we need to pull all 8. And we can't just focus on one strategy for change. And so in that startup phase of systems change, then you've got trends, a robust case for change. This is quite an old slide, and I tried to edit it to make the language a little bit more accessible yesterday. But weirdly, on my keyboard, the 1, the 2, and the 3, and the F and the V didn't work. Have you tried doing edits when only half your keyboard, anyway, couldn't do it. So we're stuck with this funny language, but I did try it and make it a bit more accessible. Harness trends for a robust academic case for change. What I would have said is make the case for change. And again, with energy, that's what we've done really quite successfully. We need to create the right incentives, business model and financing. I think there's a lot of financiers, investors in the audience today. Yes, I see a few nods. So super critical, you need to make that capital available for new technologies and then allow these new innovative disruptions to begin to move. So again, if we think about energy, these three have kind of happened, which is why we're in this middle bit at the moment where we're really trying to shift the goals of political systems, the goals of the economy. This is where advocacy is really important. It's particularly where we need to see the private sector find its voice, to be really clear what it needs from government to de-risk all the capital investment we know is needed. And it's where you start to see equitable flows of information. One of the main reasons why we haven't seen the energy transition move as quickly as we know it needs to is that we haven't had equitable information flows. People have been sitting on data and actively resisting transparency. So transparency is a really important lever of change. And then as the new system begins to emerge, we need to think about really cementing that culture and mindset shift. And I don't know if any of you are aware of the work of Donella Meadows. She did a lot of work on systems change. The deepest lever for system change are our mindsets, the stories we tell ourselves, and narratives. And it's often why public engagement campaigns designed to get us to do things differently don't work, because they actually often come here where we haven't made the case for change. And so if we're really serious about the transition to a zero carbon economy that is socially just and equitable, then we absolutely have to be serious about creating the new norms, the new frameworks that will then allow that new system to emerge. That's where you need appropriate measures and standards. I would often say this is the new rules of the game. We need economic transformation. There's no way we're going to deliver the energy transition with this model of capitalism, which is why it's so important to see the emergence of a different model. And of course, all of the innovation out there needs to scale. And as I said, for renewable, that's actually happening really well. And so the purpose of sharing this with you all is for you to sort of locate your own individual organizational strategy on this, to see where you fit in driving systems change, and to be really aware of the complementarity between these strategies and the fact that we need them all. Usually this is the order, but not always. But when we began to pull this work together, it did really help me understand, like I said, why behavior change campaigns often don't work, because they're not timed at the right stage in system change, and certainly why new regulatory frameworks just kind of plopped onto a society generally fail, because we haven't done all of this stuff too. So turning then to you as individuals, and just by the way, to bring this to life in our projects, we have worked both on just transition. So we have a big project in India called the Renewable Energy Initiative, where we created a case for change for the scaling of renewable energy in India. We then worked with investors to look at access to capital, and I guess collaboration sort of underpins all of this. And so right now we're working with a really lovely cross-section of investors, civil society, business, to scale renewable energy to drive ecologically safe and socially just outcomes. So we use this a lot in our work. We have similar work in regenerative agriculture, and it helps us figure out our own theory of change and where we need to collaborate. But to you as individuals then, because clearly one part of any how is a strategy and lovely chart, but as I said, we know that the deepest lever for change is ourselves. And it's hard in our world at the moment. Those resisting forces are really very real. And so I just wanted to share 3 things perhaps to sort of think about, to enable you to really activate this approach. The first is to solve for interconnected challenges and to avoid that carbon tunnel vision. There is a lot of it about, but actually, if we're really aware of the world around us as a set of interconnected systems, we can then ensure that everything we do has multiple benefits and multiple systems. That's why personally, I love regenerative agriculture. For example, if we restore soil health, improves nutritional quality, improves yield return for the farmer. Oh, and it also acts as a carbon sink. So in everything you do, where are the opportunities to drive multiple changes in multiple systems? So that's kind of the first thing I'd leave you with, is where are those opportunities to solve for interconnected challenges? The second thing I wanted to leave you with is, if you've got a fixed implementation roadmap, even out to 2025, look at it, say, I love you, but it's probably not going to be much use, because we are in supreme discontinuity. And actually, we all, and me included, and I do like order, chaos can be a bit disorienting, but actually we've all got to build our muscle for adaptive adaptation, to learn quickly, to experiment quickly. And, I think we're learning how to do that. But the third thing I'd like to leave you with, going back to this issue of mindset, is I'd love you all to find and embrace your just and regenerative mindset. Now, what do I mean by that? Very good question. We've done a lot of work at Forum about really trying to define what we mean by a sustainable future. And for a long time, we talked about a sustainable future. And we realized that actually that kind of language is sort of lost some of its edge. And so what we've been doing is really defining where we think the economy, society, civil society needs to get to, which is a just and regenerative future. A future where we have transformed our energy system, our food system, our health system, the economy, in ways that drives outcomes that are socially just and regenerative, which is a really tall order, but is really where we need to get to. So net zero is great, but it's a staging post, it's a milestone on the journey to just and regenerative. There's a publication on our website called the Business Transformation Compass. We wrote it for the private sector, totally applicable to the public sector. It sets out our vision of just and regenerative. It sets out a framework to how to get there. And it's the first publication where we've just written loads on mindsets, because we've really come to understand that they are key. And when we talk about a just and regenerative mindset, we talk about a mindset that, yes, recognizes planetary boundaries, but sees potential everywhere. And that's really important, because often in this world we see problems, but actually there's potential to allow people and planet to flourish. And so finding that mindset where you see potential and not problems, and one of the critical shifts in that mindset is, well, what our communities need is ... to working with the community, working with your employees, and to co-design and co-create what they think they need in order to build resilience. And so my last takeaway really is, find that just and regenerative mindset. It's really ambitious, but we all need to embrace it. And it doesn't matter where you start, whether you're in the risk mitigation mindset, but now going back to the crossroads is really the time to focus on that second pathway. We need deep and urgent transformation of all of our systems, including energy. In order to do that, we need to get serious about just and regenerative, and we need to shift our approach. What has got us here will not get us to where we need to get to. So embrace that just and regenerative mindset. Find out more. Download the Business Transformation Compass. I'm out of time. Goodbye.